Stuff in there we are. Awesome. Hey, listener, welcome to a podcast with your host, Stephen Maxted, here today. And we have Nate Simon on the other end of the screen, or on the same screen here for us today. He is an athletic therapist, and I have to look up the acronym here because you named it, Nate, Never Average Therapy and Exercise. And I thought that was
That's
so
right.
cool. You're including your name in there. And very clever on the marketing side. And Nate, how you doing today? What's going on your way?
We're doing good. Yeah, the acronym started out kind of as a joke while I was still in school for athletic therapy, and just made an Instagram account just on a whim, and just kind of ran with it. Once I got out of school, I realized there's more money to be made working for yourself. So here we are.
Awesome, man. I love that. And we recently reconnected. We go back a little bit because Winnipeg's a big small town, just to explain to the listener how we, originally met. And then recently we were both trying out some jujitsu class to learn a new skill and stay athletic, as it were. And we
Yeah,
got chatting again, and we were like, hey, we should hop on here and chat about what you're doing. So and
exactly.
what yeah. So how'd you get started? So you went to U of M for athletic therapy, is that
Yeah,
right?
he
Okay.
graduated from University of Manitoba in 2021, and so that's a 4-year Bachelor of Kinesiology. And yeah, throughout that whole degree, we do a lot of work with sports teams and in clinics. So you get um, a lot of hands-on learning and tutelage while you're in school still. So it's a pretty cool experience.
Awesome. What would be like some of the sports teams that you would have worked on? Because that's sweet that it is hands on, and it seems like the natural way to learn a lot of things, like to do with the body. And I mean, what you're doing. Well, what kind of teams have you worked with, and what did that look
Yeah,
like?
so I mean, while I was in school, they started out kind of in a cool way. They get you to bounce around between all the different bison teams. So we had football, we had hockey, track and field, volleyball, basketball, and so they give you a chance to, and soccer. I should add shots. Soccer will get mad at me if I forget them. So, but yeah, so we bounce around between all those teams, and you get a chance to kind of see what it's like. You get a chance to learn from your upperclassmen in the fourth and third years, and then kind of vote or bid on which sport you'd like to be with for the rest of your university career. So, and some people change that up, third to fourth year, but I spent both of my years with track and field, so that was a lot of fun.
Very cool. Did you do track and field yourself? Is that why you went that way?
You know what? I did it way back in like high school. Like, I was a fast kid
Yeah,
in high school, but yeah, not so much going forward in the world. So you realize
that's fair.
you're a big fish in a small pond. But yeah, so I just wanted the opportunity to work with men and women, and then just in so many different types of injuries, because there's so many different sports encompassed in track and field. So it was a cool experience to kind
Okay,
of get a lot of different and diverse experience.
cool. No, that's really wicked. That's a great recap. I didn't realize it's how the program ran, and that sounds like it's very well put together. What what's like a more common injury that you came across in track and field, or that you would see when you're in
Yes.
university?
You know what? It's a wide gamut, and no two injuries, even if it's the same injury, are really the same. But
Right.
with sprinters, we saw a lot of hamstrings, a lot of with those explosive movements, a lot of pulled hammies. We also had cross country and like long distance runners. So in their cases, it was more chronic stuff. You'd get shin
Right.
splints or ITV pain, iliotibial band pain. Um,
Yep.
those kind of chronic, persistent
Yeah,
injuries.
I know that from cycling, or like doing when
Yeah.
I do like tries and stuff. The IT is like tight. Sometimes it's
Hmm.
less good. Yeah, we got to stay on top of that. We should probably chat about that more offline. But
you
yeah,
got you
that's
got
what
my
you're
card. You
looking.
got my card.
Yeah, I do. I have it right in front of me here. Yeah, I have like the in-person reference here. That's really cool. What I think it's a great thing. Like sports are not like they were intense when I'll call them we were playing them growing up and stuff, but I feel like they've gotten more intense. Like I know you do some work with like junior B stuff. I don't remember like when I was like going through. It's not that like it was like that long ago, but I just don't remember there being like an athletic therapist there. And I could see some huge upside instead of playing through like an injury or not having that stuff right there. Like you play through some
Hmm.
stuff, and then now you got like lingering pains in like your shoulder, your leg. Like
Yeah.
after some games, it turns out someone had something broken, and we're not going to
Hmm.
NHL, so it would have been nice to have that just worked out right away, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly. There's definitely been more buy-in as of late with athletic therapy, and just understanding the value of having someone there to look out for people, and emergency situations, or just your chronic stuff and your little bumps and bruises. But we've been around for a while. The profession's been around for wow, 60, 70 years, and it's only just in the past a couple decades we're really getting more in the spotlight, and kind of people are starting to understand what athletic therapy is. And it's not just sports, it's clinic as well. We do we do more long-term rehab with folks. So you may see us on the field, and then you have
Right.
torn hammy or something, and then you're going to come see us in the clinic as well to rehab that and get back on your feet.
Nice. What would be actually, you brought up a really good point. I just think of like, we'll call like a family friend, one of the guys who do like tries with. He had a nephew that had a very traumatic big injury in hockey actually, and having someone with like some level of expertise. I mean, many of the time there's someone medically inclined in the fans just by numbers would be, but it's probably a huge advantage to have someone like yourself there, who's knows the players too. There's like level of comfort on either side there that you can go out and. Have you had to deal with anything like that?
Yeah. So I mean, oh yeah, I'm thinking back. So there's a couple different circumstances that we work, right? So sometimes we're just filling in for an event in a day, and in that case, we don't really know the athletes. We're kind of coming into it blind.
Right.
But yeah, you do end up with these potentially serious situations. But at the same time, I've worked with the junior hockey team, the Hawks there, the Charleswood Hawks, and in that case, you do know the athletes. You're a little more aware of their particular idiosyncrasies, and if they're saying, "Oh, this hurts," this tough guy potentially. Let's call him Steve, and like, okay, yeah, he's really hurt, right? So like, it's helpful to have like a little bit of an inside track on how who the players are, and that kind of helps you deal with that.
Actually, well, funny enough, well, you mentioned that. I got a really quick story here. I was still like trying to do something with like junior hockey and stuff, and I was playing up in Epoin there. I remember I cross-checked a guy, and I thought my stick broke, but it was actually my wrist.
Oh,
And I came off the ice, and I remember like taking off the stuff, and they called like his name was Mike. He was not an athletic therapist to my knowledge. He was like the trainer, but he mostly just helped get stuff ready. And then he was like, "Hey, like, what's wrong?" And I'm like, "My stick's broken." And then, but we get yakking for a minute. He's like, "Your stick's fine." And I'm like, "Oh." And then, like, I remember just like being like very casual, but like took off my like whatever, I had the glove, and part of my elbow pad on my wrist just kind of like flat. Like it was not good. But you don't always like pay attention to that stuff, where you might be able to read a player better and know like, oh, some teams like. Let's take a look at that.
And especially when adrenaline's pumping, right?
Yeah, I was just saying. Like, I had no clue. I mean, right away when I saw it and it happened, then I'm like, holy shit! Like, and this is going. Everything starts swelling. Like, it kind of all happens all at once. You're like, you gotta get this gear off before I gotta, cut off the Under Armour or whatever it is. So
exactly, yeah. Well, I mean, I was working with a judo tournament down at Dakota Fieldhouse, and judo is it's up there with the most injurious sports around. So we had a girl go get tossed and fell down, and she kind of sat up and wasn't really sure what was wrong. But her shoulder is actually dislocated. Her glenohumeral joint, so the main shoulder joint there, was out of the socket. And so we're like, okay. So we go in, we deal with it. We get her stabilized and get her calmed down. And then once we get her over the table, she's just in so much pain because the adrenaline's starting to wear off. And the EMTs showed up, and they actually gave her a fentanyl drip on the spot because she was in that much pain. So there's definitely something to be said about the adrenaline factor.
And then just being able to like read off that and stuff. Well, that's really cool. And so, what do most teams now have an athletic therapist like on there? What level do you see like people tuning into this and having that? Like, what level is the judo? What I mean, I kind of know this, but maybe talk to the listener about like what level of hockey are you seeing that happen in?
Right. So with sports like hockey, it's definitely more widely adopted. Like even down to the younger teams, 18U, 17U. Like I was doing some work for the rink there, and they are fully on board with having an athletic therapist. Some of the other sports, volleyball, basketball, it's really depends on the team. They may, if they're throwing a tournament, the event may hire an athletic therapist to oversee the entire tournament. But it's not always the case team by team that's going to have an athletic therapist. It's getting there. But I definitely with the more physical and contact sports, it's definitely more at the forefront in those particular sports because the need is obvious. But
Right.
yeah, even basketball, you do see a lot of ankle injuries, a lot of stuff like that, but people don't necessarily put those two together all the time.
Yeah. Well, no, that makes a lot of sense. So you said judo's more like common or very high common like injury. What else is on like
Mhm.
that tower? Obviously, like with like hockey, I can see lots of injuries potentially happening there. And at like higher levels, there's just your face is exposed. You're kind of putting a little bit more out there. What else would be like in there? Yeah, that
Yeah,
realm.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, hockey and football for sure.
Oh yeah,
Lots of concussions, lots of just high impact. Um, yeah, judo was something I didn't know about. The rate of injury until I went and worked for a tournament.
yeah,
Um, but as you can imagine, any combat sport is going to be pretty physical. Um,
yeah.
Another one that's really high injury prevalence is rugby because
Oh
there's no pads, and the
yeah,
rugby
yeah.
players, they're a different breed. Like, I'll tell you that right now. Like, football players, hockey players, they're tough as nails, but rugby players are just in a league of
Oh
their own
my
in
gosh.
terms of just
Yeah.
craziness.
Yeah, they don't
And
really like they have like maybe those like soft I've never played rugby, but they have like kind of like the soft helmet and then that's kind of it. Like
yeah, it's
there's no
basically just
shoulder
to protect
pads,
your
there's no
ears from getting ripped. And so
that's
there's no
crazy.
shoulder pads, no, very little or minimal padding. So
Huh. Well, that's an interesting. Wow, that makes sense why they're probably getting injured though, because there's no cushion. You're using your body to play the sport inside and out.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, outside of sports, does anyone come and see you for other injuries? What or is it do people
Yeah.
mostly know you? I mean, obviously like it's kind of like a niche, like athletic therapist, like is focused on the athletics, but do folks come and see you for other stuff?
Yeah, it's definitely a big mix when it comes to clinic. Athletic therapists are known for the work in sport, but we get folks with coming back from hip surgery, knee surgery, just work injuries. Here in Manitoba, we have the Workers' Compensation Board (WCB).
Yep.
We're covered under WCB and MPI claims. So when people get into a car accident, people get a workplace injury, lifting something, twisting, jerking, you know, disc herniation or something like that, they can
Yeah,
they can
yeah.
come see us as well. So I
Oh,
mean, there's
okay,
always
cool.
going to be like a huge group. There's lots of different disciplines that can be beneficial to folks, and we definitely fit in there with the physios, the massage therapists, the chiros, and all that jazz.
Interesting. That is good to know. So, like, I mean, that is unfortunately like a common occurrence. I remember at one of the jobs I had in the past, actually, I pulled my back. I was pretty young, and in that sense, I believe I went to physio at the time. I don't know if I attended like Cairo for that, but yeah, they were able to help tons. It's still like kind of like a lightly reoccurring thing, though, for sure. Oh,
Hmm.
that's good. And what really? I don't know if I asked this already, but like, what got you into this? How did you? What guided you to do this?
Yeah.
Obviously, like, sounds like a natural fit for like interest in the athletics, just the way that you're talking. But what really drove you to jump in here?
Yeah, yeah. You know what? Now that I'm here, it makes a whole lot of sense. But this was not even on the radar when I was younger.
That's
I was a
awesome.
traveler. I was a snowboard bum for a bit. Followed a girl off to Australia. I was just going to travel and just live life, and that was the plan. And I had no ambitions to go to university. But my most recent job before school was working at the airport, and I was dispatching there, doing
Oh,
flight plans and dispatching for perimeter aviation here in Winnipeg. And so
huh.
that job was a great job, paid well, but it was stressful as heck, and I didn't like it, and it was just killing me slowly. The real big impetus was my uncle. Actually, he developed MS, and my uncle was a huge father figure in my life, and taught me how to ski and how to all these different activities. He's a very active guy, and just to see him kind of get debilitated by that disease and eventually succumb and pass away back in 2016, that was really the tipping point that I was like, you know what, life's too short to do something you don't like doing. And did some soul searching, did some reflecting, and realized I want to help people move better. I want to help people be able to continue to use their bodies to the best of their potential, right? So that was 2017. I hopped out of my nice secure job and decided to take on a bunch of student debt and headed to an athletic therapy degree.
Awesome. Well, that's really cool, man. I'm sorry about your uncle. And to hear that, but once in a while, like those moments kind of happen. I mean, it's inevitable, but yeah, and they kind of make you look at things differently. Your point of view changes completely. So I can definitely empathize with that, but that's really cool. And then, so then you jump through 4 years of this, do the training, you get U of M students, and now you're working with teams and you're helping folks if they do hurt themselves at work. And
That's right.
yeah. What's like out of like all the things, like, is there, you mentioned like back, I would imagine that's a pretty like common one, regardless of like what you're in, just because people don't spend as much time, from what I hear, like working on like their core and stuff. Is there something in that area that you see that folks like often do, or that in the workplaces?
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's tons of opportunity to injure your back in any labor job, anything where there's lifting, in your awkward spaces potentially, welders, construction workers, whatever it may be. But yeah, people doing a lot of these tasks are working long hours and they're not necessarily focused on the perfect biomechanics of their lift every time they do it, right? It's not really realistic. So those injuries are definitely common.
Yeah. What as a preventative to that, I mean, besides the obvious of like lifting it correctly, and if I'm saying this right, because I'm not the expert in this one, but lifting with your legs, not with your back. But is there other things that folks can do to, mitigate that after the day when they have maybe done it at all? Whether that be in
Absolutely,
sports or
yeah.
otherwise? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, core strength is a huge factor, and just training in general. Staying flexible, staying strong. There's a popular physiotherapist on Instagram, Adam Meekins, who is always saying you can't go wrong getting strong, and there's nothing more true than that. So if your joints are strong, if your body's used to that load, it's much less likely to get injured. So it's usually people doing too much too fast, or just an activity they're not familiar with, they're not acclimatized to. The body adapts well in slow increments of change, but when you give it a lot of change all at once, it's usually catastrophic. So yeah, it's just building up that capacity.
Right. That's good. What about I guess in terms of like, if maybe kind of like this, because everyone is like kind of like customized. I was just gonna like pick your brain more about that, about stuff that you do, but what are some of the things that you like have there in terms of like tools that you use to like fix people when they have broken themselves? Just do that way. So it's not like specific, but it's like, because I've been in like offices like that and stuff before, but maybe for some folks that haven't. I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but you tell us like what are you guys having around there? What do those treatments look like? How long are they?
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, it's gonna differ from therapist to therapist, or clinic to clinic. Like, what I may have available to me working at one place, I don't have working at my home clinic here, right? But you're gonna use a combination of your knowledge, right? First of all, to assess and figure out what the issue is, and then kind of rationalize how you're gonna solve it and what the person needs. And depending on those needs, you can use, there's lots of different modalities that can accomplish the same thing in some cases, right? So I use cupping, I use ultrasound, I use electrical therapies like stim, IFC 10s, those type of things, and massage. We're not massage therapists, but we do use massage, and we do use our hands and some manual therapy. Cool. Yeah, and that's part of it. And so and then exercise prescription, and really getting people to buy into an active lifestyle. Because like I said, the capacity is really important, and you can't passively give that to someone. They have to do it. They have to train it, right? So every therapist is going to have a little bit of a different approach, but yeah, there's lots of tools in our arsenal to kind of tackle these different things.
Awesome. No, that's you nailed it there. Maybe just like try to break that down a little bit more. Like, I know like the ultrasound, I think most folks like do, like know what that is like for them, but I'm just gonna like play and put this out there. So like simply put, but I don't know if it's still blue cold gel goes on you. Then you're rubbing this around to like treat the area.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm so simple. But I've had to do that a few times for a couple different like muscle things or whatever. I'm sure someone's mentioned it to me a ton, but like what's that doing for someone? Like, what is that ultimately doing? That's just stimulating the stuff around the area to get more blood flow. Is that the idea?
Yeah, so it's funny you chose ultrasound actually, because that's one of the modalities that's being critiqued a lot in the literature these days. So it's something that's always been used.
Oh,
It's been
yeah.
very popular, and there's starting to become a bigger body of research showing that it may not be as effective as we thought. Right.
Okay.
So some using placebo, and I've heard anecdotally, I've heard stories of some therapists putting on the gel and doing the ultrasound, and the machine's not even on, and in some cases that's enough to create that placebo in the player's head to think that they're getting better. But that aside,
Yeah.
the physiology or the mechanics of what exactly is happening, um, it's not a visual ultrasound, or it's not a diagnostic ultrasound. So if you're going to get your pregnancy checked out, that's a different type of ultrasound, but it is
Right.
still sound waves heading into the tissue. So in this case, the sound head is sending sound waves through your tissues. It's breaking up potentially scar tissue mechanically. It's vibrating those tissues, and in doing that, it's potentially going to bring more blood flow to the area. Some reports have indicated that it can reduce pain, just by sending the sound waves in there. But like I said, it's being critiqued, and may not be as effective as we once thought. But a common use for it is like if you have an ankle sprain, and you've damaged a ligament, and maybe you haven't seen an athletic therapist right away, so that's become a big wad of scar tissue, and now you don't have good range of motion. So we're going to use that
Right.
ultrasound to hopefully to attempt to break up that tissue. And you can use other tools, right? Like you can use your thumb and massage it, and that's going to do something similar. There's all these pros and cons to all these different modalities, and it's kind of up to the therapist to kind of figure out what's going to get the most bang for our buck, and what's the right thing for this person. If this person really buys into ultrasound, maybe I'll use that. If this person is very educated on the literature of athletic therapy and they don't believe in it, then maybe it's not a go-to for me, right?
Yeah. No, well, that's super insightful. It sounds like it's more like surface right now for like being discussed of like, hey, do we move forward with this thing or not?
Mhm.
In the industry. That's cool. What was the other thing that you said there too? And I think I remember it being like the kind of like the pulse stuff. I have some work done on the shoulder before, where it's like what's that called? What did you
Right.
call it?
So I mean, electrical therapies, and
Yeah.
there are multiple types of electric therapies. The one I use personally is TENS, or transcutaneous electro neuromuscular stimulation,
Of
and
course,
yeah, those
as you said.
acronyms, they'll get you. So so the TENS, and the idea with most of the electric therapies is that it's providing a stimulus, so that your body is oblivious to pain temporarily. So the way our nerves work, at least for pain, they can only carry so much information at a time to the brain. So by putting those pads on there, sending a current through, in most cases you're getting that buzzing, tingly, pinprick sensation, and
Okay.
that sensation is masking the pain. It's overloading the nerve with that sensation so that it can no longer perceive pain, and then
Huh.
you're giving someone relief temporarily, and that can potentially allow you to get some exercise done that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise, which can be beneficial, right, for someone's range of motion or someone's strength or whatever. So lots of applications for electrical therapy.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever heard it like talked about in that way.
Hmm.
That's funny. I mean, I have it done like a few times, but I don't know if I ever asked. I was just like, okay, this is the part that's broken. What do we
Yeah.
do? That's awesome. What's personally something that you lean towards based on like experience and things that you've seen and tested on folks in terms of like, I mean, like you said, every patient's different, so we won't get too stuck in the weeds there on the specifics, but what's something that you
Mhm.
see good results from?
Yeah, so I'm confident in electrical therapy's ability to mask pain, and just making sure I explain to people that it's not going to cure them, right? It's not going to eliminate your pain completely, but
Yeah.
using it for what it's intended for. I'm confident in electrical therapies. I also use cupping a fair bit.
Oh, right.
I like cupping for a lot of different reasons, but one of them is that it's popular these days and people buy into it, right? It's something that people buy into. But it genuinely, I think it genuinely works. Creating that vacuum on the skin, lifting that tissue, separating those layers of fascia or connective tissue, allowing them to be more lubricated, allowing them to move a little bit better. I've seen good results, especially with back pain. I've seen lots of really good results with cupping.
Cool. That's good. I forgot about your third one was there as we were chatting through here, but that I have done cupping a couple times and it was pretty neat. My sister actually goes for it too.
Yeah.
What she does it for, but yeah, the, like you said, like the fascia, so it's pulling, separating like the, correct me if I'm wrong here, but like muscle from skin a little bit, basically, right? Is that the idea?
A little bit, yeah.
Or
So I mean, your
piece
all
of
of
it?
your tissues are
Yeah,
wrapped in, are like different layers wrapped and wrapped within each other. So even within just one
right.
muscle, there's different muscle fibers that are wrapped in connective tissue. And just by
Yeah,
creating that vacuum, we're just separating some of those things. So whether it's the skin to the underlying muscle or muscle to
yeah,
muscle or whatever it may be, we're just kind of giving that a bit of suction and separating tissues that aren't meant to be adhered together, that are meant
right.
to maybe slide over each other. So you get some of that range back and get some of that flexibility back.
Dang, I might need to come and do that. You've seen me
Mhm.
move on the jujitsu floor and stuff. It's amazing,
That's right.
That's yeah, huh? Well, that's really cool. I'd actually, well, glad that you've broken that down more for us too. And because I mean, like what you just highlighted there too is like one of the reasons that you like it a little bit more is what I'm hearing you say is that it is popular. So people are
Mhm.
easy to like buy into it. It's not something that's new to them. So it's multiple people using this as like a solution and putting it out there, and then it's understood a little bit more. It's easier for folks to go along with.
100%.
Yeah,
And that's one of the things I've kind of realized is that, it's not all about what you know and what the research says. That's important. That's definitely an important factor.
yeah,
But the brain is such a powerful thing. And if someone doesn't buy into what you're doing, it's going to be tough to convince them that it's helping them. Right. So it's balancing all those things. It's, using your knowledge, but also taking the person as they are, as they come into the clinic. Right. And meeting them where they're at, or educating them to help them get to where you think they need to be psychologically. If you're going to explain to them
yeah,
that this is going to work for you, this is how it's going to work for you,
for
then
sure.
that goes miles, in terms of their overall progress.
Yeah, well, I think you highlighted something that actually crossed through my head this morning when I was thinking about this conversation. I was like, I wonder, just having a little like thought. They thought I was driving, and I'm like, okay, like some things that have happened to me in the past, and going into different medical situations that folks are chatting. No matter what, they're not doing it on purpose, but they're talking in a whole different lingo than my
Hmm.
daily chat. And I know with different professions that I've been in, different industries, it's like really got to try to like go back to ground zero with lots of folks because even though they're working, they're a patient of yours or a customer of yours, they might not speak with the same acronyms. You did a great job of even here breaking them down for us one by
Oh.
one, like as you're saying them, right? And it's like, okay, good. That's easy to understand. But someone's trying to tell you that we'll use my wrist being broken. That was an easy one. But they
Yeah.
might use a bone name and something else, and I'm like, what'd you say? Like, am I like, are
Yeah.
we gonna walk out of here? Like, what's the deal? This
The
sounds pretty
construct, yeah.
detrimental, right?
Yeah, the
So
communication is a huge factor. Just understanding that, yeah, people don't have the same anatomical background that you do, and you have to use relatable terms to really get through to people. That's a huge part of our degree too. It's just talking to people and getting used to switching back between the medical lingo and the layman's terms, so that you can at the same time be specific with your notes and make
right.
sure you're addressing the right things and whatnot, or communicating with other health professionals that may be involved in the patient's care. But yeah, also talking to the person and letting them know in understandable terms, this is what we're doing, this is how it's going to help you. And yeah, it's missed on a lot of professionals. I've seen it, I've heard the stories,
Yeah.
I've experienced it myself. uh, and it just comes down to your people skills and your communication. You really have to just be aware of who you're talking to.
No, totally. Well, it sounds like you guys had like a great practicum program. I think that's what it'd be called, right? For athletic therapy. Sounds like
Absolutely,
they
yeah.
did you guys a lot of favors by doing it that way. So that's
Mhm.
awesome to hear. What I know we were talking just for a second before we hopped on here, but you have some things that are coming up and that you're going to be doing um on repeat. Do you want to I'm not even going to ask the question, right? Explain a little bit more what you have coming up. I think it's this Saturday on the calendar. What's the date on that for you? Is it the
Yeah, that's
6th?
May 6th.
May
Yeah.
6th? Okay. Yeah, what do you
Yeah,
guys
so
have
we
going on?
we have at one of the clinics I'm working out at Summit Wellness and Sport Injury. We
Okay.
have some workshops coming up. So these workshops are designed for three sports in particular: runners, cyclists, and rowers. And the idea is that we're just it's a free workshop. We're trying to get people into the clinic and kind of get them familiar with us and our and athletic therapy, and provide some value. And the value we're trying to provide is preventing injuries as you head back into sport, as you're coming off of the winter hibernation and getting moving again. This is a common time where we see those overuse injuries, those people, folks starting up too fast, injuring themselves.
That's the thing over here. I go hit it hard as soon as like, well, if you're in Canada, as soon as the weather starts cracking, you're like, I have to like actually like pull myself back from going out right away and going whole hog, because I assume that I'm on the same level. Number one, I got older and I'm probably not up to the same ability or any the conditions on the roadways and stuff like that too, to keep in mind for the cyclists up here.
100%. Yeah. And people want to start, people don't like going backwards, so they don't want to start, back from where they at the end of the season. They want to keep going, right? So you see people starting their runs with just what they left off within the fall.
Yep.
And that's just not going to go so well, right? It's just not. Like you gotta be kind to your body, and you got to just understand that it needs time to adapt. But we're just going to address, in those workshops, we're just going to address some specific injuries that are very common or prevalent in those specific disciplines, and then a couple common, again, very general, because you have to be specific when you're working with a client, but just general applications and general practical skills where people can kind of maybe mitigate some of the risks of these common ones,
Right. And, I think that's a great approach with all of those groups that you just identified there: rowing, running, and cycling, because usually very highly driven individuals are doing the sports, and it's like tough to slow them down. So I think part of
100%, yeah,
too, you're like you're bringing them in to chat with them, get them familiar with the office as part of like, bring them into the business basically, right? You want to have them have that experience so that if forbid something does happen, great, but probably better yet, grabbing the mind space, kind of like we were a little bit alluding to before, just a mentality of how different people are, but at the same time, like, getting them to realize that like they shouldn't be going, even though people probably already have started that process a little bit. Probably not rowing and cycling as much because things are still changing, but maybe running a little bit has already begun, and maybe folks have already pushed it too hard. You see that lots, unfortunately, right? Where I've seen someone is in a boot for June and July or whatever they've done. I don't know, but they pull something so hard, and knock on wood, it's neither of us, but there's you do see that often. People are at like the lake and they got something that they did, and it's probably related to that. Usually it's fairly athletic folks.
Yeah. And it's frustrating, right? Like nobody wants to be laid up all summer injured. So, if you can do a little bit of the prehab, a little bit of the, preventative work, that's, it's tough to get into people's minds, but it's way more efficient, and your outcome's going to be way better. You're going to be able to train longer. Your improvements over the year are going to skyrocket. It's like, you just got to have that little bit of patience and a little bit of discipline at the beginning of the year. And use the resources, if you have the insurance, especially, use
for sure. Because you guys are registering or a few plans that you mentioned. We don't have to get in specifics because things might change by then, but in many plans, we'll just say as like a broad term, it's something that's applicable. So you can go to with yourself who's more specialized in athletic specific therapy.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's similar to the sport adoption, right? Like it's becoming more commonly known in the insurance world. And so a lot of the insurances are starting to hop on board with athletic therapy. We're not quite there with, keeping up with like the chiros and the physios, but we're getting there. We're getting there. And in terms of the care you're going to receive, it's going to be the same quality of care.
Awesome. I love that, man. You've been awesome to chat with today. How do people, I have the card in front of me, and I bump into you a couple times a week right now. Outside of that though, how do people get a hold of you? I have the card here. Addresses.
Yeah. Short of coming down to jiu-jitsu and training. So, I'm all over the social medias. Instagram's my favorite one there. I'm Never Average Nate with all underscores between those words. Is my handle on Instagram, and my website is neveraverage.ca.
Okay, awesome. So Nate on Instagram or never_average_therapy_exercise. Is that right?
On Instagram is Never Average Nate. Never Average Nate.
Never Average Nate. Okay, sorry. I'm just reading off the Never Average Nate on Instagram. And then what was the other one you said? How do folks get a hold of you?
The website is neveraverage.ca.
Okay, awesome. I'll include that the details, but like when we post this below, so if listener has gotten this far, they'll be able to click and find you easily that way too. So
I appreciate that,
Nate. We covered like lots today. This was even wrote in our chat here. I said smooth like silk, man. This was great to have you on here. Thank you very much for being on a podcast with me today. And well, I'll see you soon. And thank you, listener, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Steve.
Awesome. Anytime. Take